Hey everyone, we had a discussion today in the Thrifty Homesteading group about a disappointing chicken experience. Someone said that they had raised some chickens and they butchered them at less than 5 months and that they were really tough and pretty much inedible. And so I wanted to talk about the difference between growing your own chickens and buying chickens from the store. So first of all, when you're growing your own chickens for meat, there are two different kinds you can get. A lot of people will get the Cornish cross, which that is what you buy in the grocery store. Those are really baby chickens. They are going to be 6 to 8 weeks old, depending on the exact strain and the size. And the modern poultry industry uses those because time is money and real estate is money. And a heritage chicken takes twice as long or even 2.5 times as long to grow to the same size as a Cornish cross can grow. And so that means that in the commercial poultry industry, they can move chickens through their grow houses at least twice as fast, if not faster, meaning they can make twice as much money in that space as they could if they were growing the other chickens. It's not necessarily the case that they eat less, because those Cornish cross, they do not get all that meat from breathing air. They are eating a lot. Some people say they eat like velociraptors. They're like, you really see their dinosaur ancestors in them, the way that they attack food, especially because you have to remove their food for 12 hours every day. Otherwise, they will literally eat themselves to death. I did not believe this the first time we raised them. And our first one was dead when it was 6 days old. And so then we started removing the feed for 12 hours. Basically, you remove it at night and you put it back in the morning. And when you put it back in the morning, they just attack it like predators attacking prey. So those are the Cornish cross, and they grow really fast. And you butcher them, they're gonna be 4 or 5 pounds by the time they are 6 to 8 weeks old, maybe 10 if you get what they call a slower growing variety of Cornish cross. And then on the other side, you have your heritage chickens. Now, the Cornish cross was developed in the 70s and 80s, and by the 80s, they pretty much overtook the whole commercial poultry industry. And so at that point, you no longer saw heritage chickens in the grocery store. If you look at pictures or photographs in cookbooks published in the 1970s or earlier, you will see chickens that look very different than the very round chickens that you see today. They look like butterballs today. The chickens from, I guess the 70s would be like 50 years ago. Those chickens have much longer bodies. They have much longer legs, longer wings, and just longer bodies in general. So they grow slower. And I personally love raising our own heritage chickens because that's what our grandparents did, and everyone before them. Everyone that raised chickens before the 70s and 80s was raising heritage chickens. And when you raise them, basically, 50% of the offspring are going to be male, 50% are going to be female. And anything you've heard about choosing the gender of your chickens is a myth. It's that you can't do it. If you could, they would not be euthanizing millions of male leghorns every year, because leghorns are the egg-laying chicken that they use commercially. And the males are like so small and skinny and scrawny that it would not be profitable to grow them for meat. So anyway, back to the meat birds or the heritage chickens. So heritage chickens are dual purpose chickens. And that would be all of your chickens like the barred Plymouth Rock, barred rock, New Hampshires, Delawares, Buff Orpingtons, pretty much everything except for this very specific meat bird. So like the Cornish cross, and then a newer version is like Freedom Ranger is a new meat bird that doesn't grow as fast as the Cornish cross, but not as slow as the heritage. So if you are raising heritage chickens, so the one of the great things about heritage chickens is that they are ideal for a homestead if you want to be self-reliant and you want to be self-sufficient. You want to be producing your own chickens. With the Cornish cross, they have to be artificially inseminated. So unless you want to get really involved in the nitty gritty of breeding chickens, you will have to buy baby Cornish cross, day old Cornish cross every year and raise them from a hatchery. If you want to have your own chicken and eggs and just raise them yourself, then you would get one of the heritage breeds or more of the heritage breeds. Basically, the way that things went back in our grandparents' day and great-grandparents' day was that their hens would feel like they wanted to start a family. And so then they would go hide somewhere and start hiding their eggs. And then when they had enough eggs for a nest, they would sit on those eggs for 3 weeks. And then one day they would come walking out with a dozen or so babies following them. This year we had a hen that hatched something crazy like 19. That was exciting. And so anyway, and so like say she walks out with a dozen babies, roughly 6 of those are going to be hens, 6 are going to be roosters. And so the 6 go on to be your egg layers, and the other 6, the 6 males, become dinner. And you can butcher one at 3.5 months, butcher another one the next week, and another one the next week, and basically butcher one every week for 6 weeks for a chicken dinner on the weekend. And that's how our grandparents did it. And that's how we do it on our farm. You know, when we have a hen that hatches eggs, or if we put some eggs in the incubator and they hatch, is that we start butchering them at about 3.5 weeks and do a few, and then, you know, next week we do a few more. And that typically means we eat one. So we know, like, yeah, this is perfect for grilling. Like, you're only going to grill them when they're really young, like 3.5 months at the most. Because if you try to grill an older chicken, it is going to be like shoe leather. So, you know that, and then if next week it's starting to get a little bit more chewy, then you know you've got to move on to a cooking method that is not such a high heat and is not going to dry the meat out. So basically you're able, the cool thing about it is that you don't have to, like, if you want to have 50 meat birds and you get 50 Cornish cross, you have to butcher all of them fairly quickly. You know, when we've most of the time when we've done those is if I happen to walk into Tractor Supply and they've got some Cornish cross that are a week old and nobody's bought them and they're selling them now for 50 cents or $1 a piece, and I just can't pass up a bargain. So I come home and it's like, honey, here's a bunch of chickens that we're going to eat in a couple months. And so anyway, with those, because they grow so fast, like, you really can't spread out the butchering as much. So that's when you need to get all your friends. Like if you've got 50 of them, you know, get all your friends together and maybe do 25 this week, 25 next week, or something like that. One year, my husband was trying to do them like he did the heritage chickens. And, you know, by like 3 months or 4 months, 4 months, 3 months. Yeah. It's hard for me to think in terms of Cornish cross ages. Yeah. So by the time they were 3 months of age, which is 12 weeks, we had some chickens that were like 7 pounds. Like, that's a small turkey. That's a heritage turkey hen that's, you know, 6 months old. So like a Royal Palm turkey hen that's 6 months old. So anyway, with the heritage chickens, you can butcher them over time. The other thing that's really awesome is that those are your laying hens. So most of our laying hens go for about 3 years. We don't light the chicken coop in the winter, so they are able to have a holiday for 2 or 3 months. And so they remain really good layers for about 3 years for us. And at the end of that 3 years, then they become stew meat. And I get so sad when somebody says that, like, old hens aren't good for anything but dog food, or they're not good for anything, because that is so untrue. If they say that, they're just letting you know that they don't know what a stew hen is. A stew hen is actually my favorite meat in the whole world. Basically, if you are butchering an old hen that's a few years old, what you do is you put it in a pot of water, and it's called a stew hen because you stew it. So you put it in a pot of water, like crock pot, low heat. And the older they are, the longer it is going to take them to cook. We've actually butchered some at 4 or 5 years of age, and they are they take a lot longer at that point. And what I do is, so if they're 2 or 3 years old, I typically after about 2 to 3 hours, I stab it with a fork. And if the meat pulls off the bone, it's ready. If it's not, I come back an hour later and I stab it again and see if the meat pulls off the bone. If you're not sure, you can taste it. Is it tender? No, let it keep cooking for another hour. Come back. You don't want to let it go too long, because if you do, then all of the cartilage that holds the bones together is going to completely disappear. And then you will discover just how small some of the bones are in a chicken, because like all those bones around the ribs and the spine and stuff are going to be so incredibly tiny that you are not going to be able to see them all. And so you'll wind up chewing on a few of them, which is not really my favorite thing to do. So just be sure that you pull it out once it's tender enough. There's no point. In fact, letting it cook beyond the point of tenderness, you actually start to lose flavor in the meat, and the meat, weirdly enough, starts to dry out, not in a rubbery way, but in a more of a chalky way. So just always check it, see if it pulls off the bone, then taste it. And once it tastes good, you're good to go. Turn it off. You get so much good stuff from this. If you've got any casserole recipes or chicken salad recipes that you love, this is the best meat in the world for all of your chicken casseroles and your chicken salads. The other thing that you get out of this is a really delicious bone broth. So forget ever buying bouillon again. You can freeze the bone broth in like 1 cup increments or 2 cup increments, however you think you're going to use it in the future for making any kind of a soup that calls for chicken broth. And you can also just drink it in the winter. It's a really good drink to have, have a cup of hot bone broth in the morning for breakfast after you've had your coffee. It's delicious. So there's so much that you can do with chickens of all ages. You just have to know how to cook them. In fact, the 1985 edition of Julia Child's book, The Way to Cook, she, in the section on making broth or stock, she laments the fact that as of 1985, she could no longer buy stew hens in the grocery store. And so she tells you that you're going to have to use just a regular chicken from the store, and it's not going to be as good. And she also says that she had to buy a stew hen directly from a farmer the last time she wanted one. So lucky us, those of us who have our own layers, we can have our own stew hens. And I'm really excited that this is the year when our hens are aging out. So we're going to have stew hens this fall. And I'm very excited about that, because stew meat is something that we only get about every 3 years or so. So we're going to have that this year. One of the things that really helped me in learning how to cook with this meat was going to yard sales and buying old cookbooks. So if you see a yard sale that looks like they've got some books, stop in and see if they have any old cookbooks, because those old cookbooks will talk about the kind of chicken that you need for the recipe. Like they'll tell you, to use a fryer, because a fryer is going to be a smaller chicken that's only about 3.5 months of age. And as they get older, like a roaster or a broiler, you would use a slightly bigger chicken that's a bit older, that's not going to be as tender, and it wouldn't work for like grilling and stuff. In fact, when we were brand new to this, the second rooster we ever butchered was an 8-month-old rooster that was attacking my children. And so I said, that's it, he's got to go. And we butchered him and thought we could. And I said, oh, we haven't had this great grilled chicken recipe lately, so let's do it. And we did. And unfortunately, it was as tough as shoe leather. Everyone in the family gave up on it except for our son, who was about 12 years old at the time. And it looked like he was going to pull his teeth out as he was had a leg of chicken there and was trying to pull the meat off the bone because it was so tough. So if you're thinking about growing your own chickens, or if you've already grown your own chickens this year, if you've got heritage, just be sure that you use the right type of recipe and the right cooking method for the age of the chicken. If you've got any questions, feel free to post in the comment section below and I'll get back to you. Bye for now.